This video section will cover Section 26, Inspection of a New Aircraft, and it will also include a comprehensive preparation for first engine start, initial startup procedures, rotor system testing and tracking procedures. In Section 26, you will notice the pre-flight checklist consisting of several pages. This checklist is required to meet the FARs and keep the aircraft airworthiness certificate valid. Check each item on the checklist and enter notations where required. It is important that the builder thoroughly read each section in its entirety, including the diagnostic procedures of the RI 162F engine manual. This will help provide an overview and an insight leading to a successful and long-lasting power plant operation. The RI 162F power plant is designed to burn premium, unleaded, or leaded automotive gasoline, which has a minimum octane rating of 92. Use only gasoline from known major brand stations, which has fuel specially formulated for fuel injection, such as Mobil, Texaco, Arco, etc. 100 low-lead aviation gasoline may also be used. If you haven't done so already, put the battery in service by adding the electrolyte as recommended by the manufacturer. Always use safety glasses when handling the electrolyte. Charge the battery as per the manufacturer's instructions, and use an aircraft hydrometer to measure the specific gravity of each cell. Be sure and record the date the battery is put in service, and it is also a good practice to label the battery with that date. Do not connect the battery, put gasoline in the fuel tanks, or turn on the fuel pumps until advised to do so during these procedures. Inspect all of the installed fuel hoses and fittings, and make certain you have complied with the following rules. Make sure that there is an adequate clearance between the hose ends and anything they might be able to contact. While the hose end is flexible, the ends are not. Do not allow a hose to contact a sharp corner, nut, bolt, rivet, stem, or anything else that might cause damage. Do not allow a hose to rub against anything, even if the surface on which it rubs is flat. The stainless steel braid is a very efficient low-speed file and will abrade through anything that it moves against. In order to prevent chafing and to keep your hoses where you want them, support the hoses with wire ties or cushion loop clamps. Do not force the hoses to bend too tight. Do not kink the hose, either by bending too tight, by misalignment between the hose end and fittings on the short assemblies, or by getting the whole assembly into a helix on long assemblies. Check the tightness of all fuel hoses. Do not over-tighten the hose ends onto the adapter fittings. The seal is achieved by the design of the mating surfaces, not by muscle. If it leaks, it has probably been assembled incorrectly. Damage to the cone and seat can be caused by various mistakes on assembly, the most common of which are dirt and over-tightening. The Rotorway FADEX system is a totally unique and customized system designed especially for use in the Exec 162F helicopter. It is extremely important for each builder pilot to completely understand the operation of the FADEX system and the following procedures. This knowledge is essential for you to properly construct, maintain, and fly the helicopter. Note, Rotorway has produced two versions of the FADEX system. There are slight differences in component location and arming and turning on procedures. Refer to the flight manual that was included with your helicopter. This video will be testing and demonstrating the earlier version. At the starter, disconnect the wire between the starter and the starter relay. Ensure that this wire cannot short against anything when the battery is eventually connected. This is done to protect against inadvertent start of the power plant and to allow later testing of the starter relay. Inspect the routing, security, and condition of the FADEX wiring harness. It must be well supported and not allowed to chafe against any other component. Wires should not be pulled tight or radically bent. Connector plugs should be secured and not allowed to vibrate excessively. All plugs should be checked for proper connection with locking tabs engaged. Caution: installation of the 36-pin plug onto the ECU with the white pin alignment piece removed will damage the pins of the connector plug. This could result in an erratic and dangerous malfunction of the ECU. Before connecting the battery, first make sure all of the overhead switches are off. It is also a good practice to verify that there is not a short in the system before connecting the battery. This can be accomplished by using an ohm meter between the positive and negative battery cables. Connect the battery. During the following initial testing, if any of the switches fail to function properly, use the appropriate wiring harness schematic to troubleshoot the problem. Warning: do not attempt to disassemble any FADEC connector plug without first contacting Rotorway's customer service. Special tools and procedures must be used on these parts to prevent damage and possible component failure. Test the fuel pumps for proper operation by turning the switches on and off one at a time. You should be able to hear a pump when it is operating. Only run the pumps for a short time, since running a pump dry can cause damage. Each switch should operate one and only one pump. By feeling the body of a pump, you can tell if it is running or not. Test the fuel pump inertia switches on both the inertia switches from the mounting bracket. Hold one switch upright in one hand and strike it sharply with the other hand. Turn on the corresponding fuel pump switch. The pump should remain off. Reset the inertia switch by pressing downwards on the top of the switch. This should cause the fuel pump to turn on. Turn the fuel pump off and test the other switch in the same way, and reinstall the switches to the bracket. Test the ignition switches. Begin by disconnecting plugs indexed A and C on the FADEC wiring harness. These plugs attach to the 6-pin receptacles of the ignition modules. Turn the switches on and off, one at a time. Verify the voltage to pin A of the connectors as shown. Do not reconnect plugs A and C at this time. Arm the FADEC system. Refer to your Exec 162F flight manual and follow the detailed procedures. Turn each FADEC switch on and off, one at a time, to ensure that each provides an independent source of power. The green light on the instrument panel should remain on during this procedure. If any problems are encountered, refer to the diagnostics section under ARM FADEC. Check the FADEC backup system. Refer to your Exec 162F flight manual and follow the detailed procedures. You should be able to hear the secondary injectors. They should make a buzzing sound in all throttle positions except full open. Touch the body of each injector to ensure that both are operating. The green light on the instrument panel should be off and the red indicator light should be on. Check the switches in the following combinations as shown. FADEC 1 on, FADEC 2 and secondary off. FADEC 2 on, FADEC 1 and secondary off. FADEC secondary on, FADEC 1 and 2 off. Turn all switches off. Extended running of dry injectors can damage them. If any problems are encountered, refer to the diagnostic section under Secondary Backup System. Caution: if the fuel pumps are turned on when the secondary system is activated, fuel will be delivered to the engine even when the engine is not running. In order to perform the following procedures, it will be necessary to remove all wires connected to the ignition modules and carefully support the seat back panel as shown. Leave the ECU connected. Make sure that the wires are not pulled tight and the panel is supported. Rearm the FADEC system. The digital display monitor should be illuminated. If the digital display does not function properly, refer to the diagnostic section under Digital Display. When scanning the values of the monitor, the upper readout should be 0 engine RPM. The value for the engine manifold pressure and the barometric will be identical. In this application, their values are derived from the same type sensor. The throttle position should vary from 0 to 100 as the throttle position is changed. Since the engine is not running and is developing a vacuum, the manifold pressure value should be close to the barometric pressure value. These values are derived from two different sensors, which can vary up to 0.5 kilopascals in accuracy. As the throttle position is changed, the pulse width value should vary from 10.0 to 0.5. The value for the spark advance should vary from 14.0 to 12.0. The air and water temperatures should be accurate. If any values are incorrect, refer to the diagnostic section under Sensors. Move the digital display to Diagnostics. The upper and lower readout should be 0. If an error code is displayed, refer to the Diagnostics section under Error Codes. Carefully disconnect the water temperature sensor plug. The yellow light on the instrument panel should activate. Number 5 should appear in the lower readout. Pressing the Set button should not clear the error. Carefully reconnect the plug. The error should remain illuminated, indicating the system's ability to detect a momentary error. Pressing the Set button should clear the error message. Warning: if an error is recognized by the FADEC during operation of the helicopter, do not attempt to clear the error message by using the Set button. This is to be done after landing to determine the nature of the problem. The only exception to this rule is normal diagnostic reset, which is performed during the startup procedures. Follow the same procedures as in the water temperature sensor test to test the primary throttle position sensor air temperature, and barometric sensors. The FADEC will switch control to the backup system if both the primary throttle position sensor and the manifold pressure sensor fail. A momentary error condition on either sensor will lock the error as it relates to this switching function. This means that the FADEC will switch to the backup system the instant the other load sensor fails, even if the momentary error has been repaired and cleared. Only a restart of the ECU will clear this lock. Restart the main ECU by turning off both FADEC switches and then rearming the system. Carefully unplug the manifold pressure sensor. The yellow warning light on the instrument panel should illuminate. Number 2 should appear in the lower readout of the digital display. Carefully unplug the primary throttle position sensor. The green and yellow should go out. The secondary system should activate and turn on the red light. Turn off both FADEC switches. Carefully reconnect the throttle position sensor and the manifold pressure sensor plugs. Rearm the FADEC system. The red and yellow light should be off and the green light on. Turn off both FADEC switches. Carefully disconnect the ECU plugs and carefully lay down the seat back panel. Do not engage the starter at this time. To test the operation of the starter relay, connect the voltmeter between the frame ground and the previously disconnected relay wire. Turn the key on and the instrument switch. Engage the starter button. The meter should read 12 volts. Turn off the key and verify lockout of the starter circuit. Turn off all switches. Reconnect the starter relay wire to the starter. Do not crank the engine at this time. In Section 18, you are instructed to install the components of the oil system and prime the engine oil pump. Review this section and the engine manual for further information. Check the oil filler cap dipstick to verify your engine has the proper level of oil. During the start procedure of the helicopter, one of the first things the pilot must do is verify the oil pressure is rising within 5 seconds after the engine starts. The small tube that runs from the oil filter fitting to the pressure gauge on the instrument must be purged of all the air bubbles to get an accurate reading. Disconnect the fitting on the gauge and place the end over a container. Disconnect the other end of the tube at the oil filter. Use an oil can filled with engine oil to pump oil into the tube. Keep pumping until the tube is completely filled with oil. Then reconnect the fittings. Review Section 20 of the construction manual and video to review the installation of your fuel system. Do not perform the following test until a helicopter is ready for its first startup and idle check. Have a fire extinguisher by the helicopter and wear eye protection. If you have a leak, the pressure of this system can cause fuel to be sprayed surprisingly far and fast. Remove any panels that will give you better view. Put a total of 3 to 4 gallons of fuel in the tanks. This is adequate for testing and for initial start of the helicopter. Turn on the fuel valve. Turn on the instrument switch. Turn on one fuel pump and check for leaks. Immediately turn off the fuel pump and fuel valve if a leak is detected. If a leak is found, pressure will remain in the system after the pumps and valve have been turned off. Slowly disconnect the hose at the spot of the leak and be prepared for fuel to spray from the connection. Turn on the second pump. Carefully check for leaks. One good way to check for small leaks is to run a clean finger on all the connections on the fuel system. Even a small drop can be found using this procedure. If a fluid shows up on your finger, smelling it should verify if it is fuel or simply oil used during the installation process. The importance of this inspection cannot be stressed enough because a fuel leak on this system can be extremely dangerous. Even the smallest leak can develop into a large one in a system operating at high pressure. The design of this fuel system consistently pumps fuel in a circle when the pumps are running. In other words, gasoline is being returned to the fuel tank continuously. The sounds which the fuel pumps make will change as the air is removed from the system. If you turn off the fuel valve and the pumps are running, you will hear the sound change. This sound change is the result of the restriction on the inlet of the pumps. Do not operate the pumps with the fuel valve off. The fuel pressure gauge should be reading 55 psi.